I was in full shackles when I found out that my father died and that I'd never be seeing him again. So in 2002, I committed a robbery, an unrelated non-fatal shooting, and I went to prison. I pleaded guilty to the crimes that I'd committed, and I was sentenced to twice the high point of the guidelines. So rather than 10 to 16 years, I was sentenced to 32 years. So in 2004, when I was at the first major prison that I was at, my dad came to me and said, you know, Jesse, I want to do this. I've wanted my whole life to leave this country. I want to live a different life. Like, are you okay with that? And I mean, what am I going to say? Like, I'm in prison. I've like messed my whole life up. I'm definitely not going to tell my dad he can't go somewhere or he can't do something. So I said, yeah, absolutely. I support you. I want you to live your good life. So he retired. He basically took all his money and they moved to Costa Rica. So my stepmom was staying up here and working 2 weeks and then going down there. But he lived at this little, village town in Costa Rica. He had an amazing life. He ran around with his shirt off. He ate fish straight out of the river. I mean, he was living some kind of like jungle paradise. And when he was down there, I mean, the problem was he didn't have a sense of connection. So where we were from, he had friends, he had people he worked with, he had people he helped. Like, he was a part of a community, and that was really important to him. When he went down there, he lost all of that. Like, he tried to fly people down, he tried to stay connected, he tried to make relationships with locals. It just didn't happen. And this sense of disconnect really kind of eroded the goodness in his life. It really eroded his health and, gave him a lot of things to concern about. So the first time I heard about it was that he had fallen ill, that something had happened and they had to get him out. So they ended up medevacing him to San Jose. And it's because he had a blood clot, and the blood clot could have potentially killed him, but they managed to find the blood clot and get it out of his system and thought he was going to be okay, but then realized he needed heart surgery. And this was right around the time I was actually in the hole for possession of contraband syrup. So I was back there, and then I was feeling especially angry at myself for, like, why did I think it was important to get syrup? Like, why is this whatever? And so I'm powerless. And they're like, oh, well, he's got to get a surgery. But like, we looked it up, and there's literally a world-renowned surgeon in San Jose. It's safer than trying to fly him up here to the United States. It'll be cheaper. Like, this just makes the most sense. So I was the only one who was worried. Like, I was terrified. I just knew something was going to go wrong. And everybody else was like, no, this is really standard. This has got like a 99% success rate. Like, they're just changing a heart valve. Like, he's even so healthy. They want him to have a pig valve rather than like an artificial one because he's going to live so much longer. Basically, that it's just nothing to worry about. And I was just wrecked, and part of that was that I was just sitting in the hole all day with nothing to do and just kind of thinking about it and worrying about it. So then I was really grateful there was an operations officer at Nottoway at the time who got me to get a phone call. So I got to talk to my dad the day before he died. And she got me to the office, and I'm wearing this jumpsuit and shackles and kind of walking up the hallway. And she said, look, I'm going to take responsibility for this. It was one of those moments of humanity. And she took the shackles off, and I think she left the handcuffs on. But she was like, look, just stay there, leave them be. So rather than the officers kind of breathing down my neck while I was having this conversation, because again, I was in the hole for syrup. I wasn't a tremendous security threat. She let me sit in the office and have that conversation. And it was only a few minutes, but I got to talk to him and I got to say, I'm worried about you. And the problem is when he was in Costa Rica, I couldn't call there. You couldn't make collect calls to foreign countries. So at most you could make a call every 3 months, and they would do it through the international services, and they had to set up a collect service and something special. So I hadn't talked to my dad in months. I hadn't seen him in months. It had been a long time. So the day of the surgery, I'm kind of worried. I'm pacing. I haven't slept very well. I'm just losing my mind. And the psychologist comes by, and I was really grateful. She said, Jesse, we just got word your dad's fine. We wanted to let you know, it's okay. And so it surprised me because I'd been so worried, and I'd just been so sure something was going to go wrong. And I don't know why. It just really weighed on me heavily. And so I finally went to sleep. It was okay, well, I'm really glad. Things are okay. Maybe I don't have to worry. And while I was sitting there asleep in the hole, all of a sudden the door popped. And the door doesn't pop in the hole. Before you get out, they make you come to the door, they cuff you up, they do all these crazy things, and they just popped the door and they were like, hey, Crossan, come here. You need to put the shackles on. I was like, what? That doesn't make any sense. That's not how operation goes. But they knew what had happened. And it was, again, a slight moment of humanity, because even though they had to put me in shackles, they did it in a more comfortable way in the cell in front of me, rather than making me go to the door and do all these things that are designed to basically break you down. I mean, they may be security procedures. But again, when somebody's in the hole for possession of syrup, I don't think the security procedure necessarily applies. And they said, well, you've got a visit, we got to take you. And you don't get visits during the week in the hole. It just doesn't happen. So they're taking me up the boulevard, and they have to shut the boulevard down, and I have to do this shuffle all the way up the boulevard, and I'm looking around, and they've got everybody locked behind gates, and nobody can move. And they don't take me to the visitation room, because when you go to visits in the hole, there's a little hallway next to the regular visitation room that has slots in the wall that have these, big plexiglass things that you see through, and a seat you can sit in, and you have to kind of yell through it because there are holes in the grate next to the plexiglass. but they've been painted over, so you can't really do anything. But rather than there, they actually took me to the entrance of the prison, which is where you don't go. There's literally a big sign that says, no inmates past this point. Like, you go there, and it's basically like you're trying to escape. And they shuffled me through there, and I saw my mother and my stepfather. And I walked in, and as soon as I did, I said, my dad, and she said, yeah. And she started crying, and I started crying, and so I shuffled over there, and again, they were really amazing. Like, they left the shackles on me, so I'm like, hand and foot, and then those two things tied together. But they let my mother give me a hug. They let me sit on the couch next to her. They let her, kind of put her arm around me as I cried. But it was also like, it was like one of those false cries. Like, I wanted to feel it, but I had been so resigned. I had been so kind of broken that it was like I felt empty. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel emotional. I just felt broken. So we talked for a couple minutes, and I think they gave us like half an hour. I can't remember exactly. And then they shuffled me back to the cell. And on the way back, I was really grateful because the psychologist, the same one who had told me, said, look, I need to see him now, got me in the office. And she said, look, you're back there for some BS. And I had already actually been released by the hearings officer. She'd been like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Like, I'm releasing you. I don't care what they do. But the process takes forever. You get released from the hole. You have to wait till a bed opens up. Sometimes you can be back there 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month. So the psychologist said, look, do you want to stay back there or do you want to come out? Like, what do you need right now? And I said, well, yeah, I don't want to be in the hole. Like, this isn't helpful. She said, okay. She gets on the phone and she calls the watch commander, and the warden is basically, look, for mental health reasons, you are going to release this person today. He needs to go to this cell in this pod. And I was amazed because, again, this incredibly humane, caring thing. So I go back to the hole, and they're like, look, pack your stuff. They said you're leaving. So, I get the shackles off. I packed a couple things I have. But while I'm sitting there waiting for them to let me out, I'm looking at these pictures of my dad. And these are pictures that they later took when I went to the next prison because they said they were inappropriate photographs. But I'm looking at these pictures, and again, I'm kind of willing myself to cry. I'm trying to grieve, and I just couldn't. I couldn't connect to the sense of loss. I couldn't connect to the reality that I would never see my father again, because in many ways it felt like I'd already lost him. Like when he moved to Costa Rica and I couldn't see him once a month and we couldn't have phone calls, it already felt like he'd been gone. But it was one of those things that, I got out and I was amazed because when I got moved into this new pod and people were like, yeah, where are you coming from? Like, what happened? And I told guys, I said, look, my dad just died. Like, if I see him off, I told my roommate this, this isn't me. I'm kind of struggling. Like, I'm still in shock because my dad died. And guys talked to me, guys, pulled me aside and were like, man, do you need some coffee? Because they still had all my property in the hole. They didn't release that till Monday. Gave me coffee, gave me food, just talked to me, told me stories about their dad, asked me about my dad. It was like the most amazing, emotional, supportive response from guys that I'd never met. I didn't know anybody in this pod. It was just guys showing up because everybody understands that common trauma. Like, you're in prison, everyone is afraid of losing a loved one. Everybody's afraid of feeling completely powerless and lost and cut off from the world. And so they showed up for me. But I still wasn't able to really connect with that grief. And that didn't happen for about another year and a half until I got transferred to Buckingham. So I'm getting transferred into this new prison, and I'm kind of excited because it's supposed to be better and more open and have advantages. As I'm going through the intake process, they're going through my pictures, and like every third picture they're setting aside and saying I can't have. These are all the pictures of my dad. Because living in Costa Rica, he would run around shirtless, or he would just take these crazy pictures. It would be him with like a pitchfork, and they said that was a weapon. It was just all these things they were taking, and that was when it hit me that I was never going to see my father again. That not only was I never going to see him again, I could not even have the pictures of him. Like, I had messed my life up so badly, and I was now in a situation where I wouldn't even be able to hold on to the memory of him because those things would slip away. I had already started forgetting about the sound of his voice or forgetting what he looked like. I was losing every single thing in that moment, and I was so sad, and I was so angry, and I was so completely overwhelmed. And again, there was one person who had a moment of humanity, and it was one of the officers. He saw that. Like, he saw the tears in my eyes. He saw that I was shaking. And he just kind of looked at me and said, like, look, calm down. And he started sliding the pictures back in. So every one the other people would take out, he'd take about every second or third one and he would slide it back in. So they still ended up taking 30 or 40 pictures for me. But he just made that gesture. Like, he did what he could to get those last couple pictures back to me. And that meant the world. Like, it didn't make it okay. I was still missing my father. I was still in grief. I was still like completely powerless and frustrated. But it showed me that people cared. It showed me that somebody realized, you know what? This guy having his shirt off in a picture in Costa Rica is not a problem. This is not a security threat. In fact, this guy having this picture is probably conducive to his rehabilitation because it reminds him of something good. It reminds him of something important. It gives him a direction to move toward. Whereas taking this away is literally just taking away another lifeline from somebody. We're saying, hey, we want you to turn your life around, but let's take this lifeline away. And it's just an example of how inhumane the prison system is. And people say, oh, well, you should have thought about that before you committed crimes. No, that's not how the world works. Nobody thinks about the inhumanity of the prison system. Nobody knows about sentencing laws when they're committing crimes. Nobody knows about prison conditions. People make irrational decisions in states of, mental health breakdowns, in states of addiction, in states of stress. People don't think about crimes before they commit them. That's the problem. But then treating them more inhumanely, taking away the lifelines, taking away the hope, taking away the positive structures, and not only that, not teaching better communication skills and better coping methods, not giving people the tools they need to succeed is not going to make them better people. So we have a system that genuinely breaks people down further, prevents growth, prevents the kind of lifelines and things that will help them grow. And then only by the grace of God and amazing people did I find the support and the guidance and the ways to move forward, because so many people didn't have that. So many people didn't have amazing friends and family and people who would show up for them. So I was able to succeed. I was able to turn my life around. I was able to get an education. I was able to move forward because I was fortunate enough to have those resources and other people didn't. So this is another example of where literally if you're poor, if you don't have resources, if you don't have connections and support, the system is so much harder for you. And that doesn't make sense. Don't we want to make sure that people are turning their lives around? Don't we give people every tool they need? This is just another example of how we have a prison system that doesn't work and it doesn't make people better. And that if we address that, we're going to have a lot more success stories of people coming out.